5 qualifiers down, and you can see me on screen as well as my spreadsheet now. That's because Qualifier 6 is where I want to start streaming some of the games on Tabletop Simulator, on Twitch. I'll be announcing those before I do my first test stream on the Discord for Smash Up, and I'll be announcing them more as I get to the point where I'm sure I'm doing a decent job of producing a decent stream. Because there's going to be a little bit of learning curve for me in getting used to having my camera set up here, having the information here, having Tabletop Simulator running, and not making incredibly stupid plays as a result of distracting myself looking at chat while I'm playing a game and trying to play it as accurately as possible. But this video is primarily about what happened during Qualifier 5, and Qualifier 5 was quite different from Qualifier 4. If you look at the scores in Qualifier 4, there were a lot of draws that happened in that qualifier. It felt like there were a lot of good but not great decks in the qualifier, and as a result, it was just sort of a lot of boring-looking stat lines at the end. You know, decks finishing 3-3 or 5-3, which is not going to be good enough to make the championship field, and a deck that really deserves to be a championship deck in Class A will be able to get to 6 wins in a qualifier. Qualifier 5 was the opposite. We had our first 8-0 deck winning, and I may have just goofed up and put my... Yeah, I completely goofed up and put my camera over their record. But Mage and the Beast finished with an 8-0 win-loss, a strength of schedule of their opponents having a combined 11 wins and losses. Then we also had Zombie Explorers, who finished second in this qualifier, 6-2, with the best strength and schedule of any 6-2 deck in the 5 qualifiers so far, and with both their losses coming to Mage and the Beast. Our third place finisher was the rather popular Sinister Werewolves deck. Werewolves at this point have 2 decks that have auto-qualified and the 2 top wildcards, which will definitely also be in the tournament. This case, it was Sinister Werewolves. Now, Sinister 6 decks, for me, most random Sinister 6 combinations are kind of bad. The Sinister 6 combinations that do work tend to have a fairly serious Peter Principle issue, even though they are not control decks. They have their Peter Principle issue, that is, once they reach the point where they start to struggle, they suddenly go from winning all the time to losing all the time. They have this issue because if they're getting beaten in terms of how much power they can get out, they have a tendency to be able to break a base but lose it. And that's not the way you win a game. But Sinister Werewolves, while it got beat up pretty badly in the qualifiers for Class S last year, it proved to be good enough to get an unstoppable level of momentum going with the help of the Werewolf Titan and doubling Sinister 6 talents in order to get to the point where it could win all of its games, except the 2 it played against Zombie Explorers. And interestingly, Zombie Explorers, when they played... who did they... Let me just make sure I'm not messing up. Oh, when they played Fairy Dragons in their semifinal, they had a couple of quite lucky games where they were able to get their Explorer 5 out very quickly and then recur him to do some crazy boosted stuff, and then they had exactly the opposite against Mage and the Beast. On top of that, Mage and the Beast also developed more quickly than Fairy Dragons did, and so Zombie Explorers ended up playing 4 games, winning 2, losing 2, and none of them were all of that close, even if the scorelines look a little close. So that was maybe a little bit of a spoilery look at the top finishers there, but now it would be great to look at how the entire qualifier went. So we start here. We had a lot of... actually, we had a pretty unremarkable first round with a reasonably normal number of draws, and after that is when the blood really started. You see 6 out of 16 decks got eliminated in the second round. That is what I call a smashing success for saving myself time in games played in the third round, but it also demonstrates that there's a difference in strength between some of the different decks in this qualifier, which is exactly what I want to see, because that means that the winners are going to be worthy winners. Elder Teddies. Who did they play in the first round? They played Zombie Explorers in the first round. They played Princess Shield in the second round. You can make the argument that they could still be quite a decent deck despite going 0-4 because their opponents were pretty good. Princess Shield went 3-3 in this, but this is a strong field. These qualifiers are all pretty good decks. Zombie Explorers, of course, finished second. Realistically, though, Teddies are maybe not the best faction to help Elder Things get to the 6-power breakpoint to start bringing out Shoggoths. It didn't feel like the most synergistic partner ever for Elder Things. While Teddies are great at helping Elder Things bring out the actual Elder Thing minion, because you can potentially sacrifice a pair of 1-power minions, a number of the Teddy swarm boosting cards just don't really work well with Elder Things who tend to be short on minions in the first place, so not a great deck. Shapeshifter Critters is a much better deck than a 1-3 record would indicate. And what happened? They played Fairy Dragons in the first round, who started 4-0, and were one game away from making a decent wildcard record. And this was a case where the Fairy Dragons were just a little bit better at getting there, but also Shapeshifters and Critters. Neither of these decks really like facing dragons. They don't have good ways to deal with an Imperial Dragon, while Critters can deal with a Hatchling. Their removal is still awkward. When you have to rely on one minion with a destroy a 2 or less power minion here as it comes into playability, and then you have to find a way to play that minion, kill it, play it again, and this is your only way to get rid of a Hatchling, that's not great. When you're trying to use Tadpor, this is great for dealing with Hatchlings. It is much less than great for dealing with Imperial Dragons, because when you move the Imperial Dragon away, you let the dragons draw a card, which is exactly what you don't want them to do. This is exactly why you want to get the Imperial Dragons out of the way. All of Dragon's anti-swarm cards work very well here, and if Shapeshifter Critters try to bring out beefy Shapeshifter minions, they end up becoming targets for Glimmer. So Fairy Dragons just had exactly the right kit to stop Shapeshifter Critters. That is why Shapeshifter Critters started 0-2, and then Kitty Wizards just had one good game against them where everything went right. This can happen with any Wizards T deck. Kitty Wizards, another eliminated deck I might as well talk about a little bit. In the first round, I think one of the great achievements they managed was to get through their deck not one time in a 1v1 game, as is normal for decks with good card draw, but 3 times, 3 full reshuffles, followed by then losing the game to Ninja Cowboys, because Ninja Cowboys dealt with the big cards they had that were actually threats. Ninja Cowboys had the Ninja Specials in order to provide some insurance if Kitty Wizards did a mediocre job of bursting, which unfortunately when they try to burst, they do a mediocre job of it. So Kitty Wizards is a little bit like Time Traveler Wizards. It's a lot of Sound and Fury, not quite signifying nothing, but not signifying very much. Next eliminated deck, Bears and Spies with 2 Titans. In the first round, you might notice 16-17 was the final score in the second game against Sexy Mage and the Beast. That is Mage's Beauty and the Beast, who went 8-0. Let's take a quick look at their scores. 2-point difference here, 2-point difference here. Nothing close. As a matter of fact, Bears and Spies came the closest to beating Mage and the Beast of any deck in this qualifier. And then they had a pairing that I probably should have adjusted in the second round, where they played the other Beauty and the Beast deck. Let me tell you, Spies do not like facing Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast has a bunch of cards that are guerrilla tactics, if you played Magic a very long time ago. If you have to discard them from your hand, you can then play them for free. Spies loves to occasionally get a cheap game win by having the Spy Who Ditched Me in their opening hand, and making their opponent start the game with no minions. When you try to do this to a Beauty and the Beast, they just get a 2-power minion out for free. So as a result, Bear Spies really ended up facing counters both times to their spy side of things. Zombie and the Beast also, zombies do tend to be a counter to any sort of removal faction. While hostile movement is fairly good against zombies, bears still also have that destruction angle, which, if anything, almost helps zombies as much as it hurts them. So this was just, they had bad matchups. They very well may have made it farther than the second round if they had different matchups. Ant Polynesians. They drew the Steampunk Knights in the first round, who did quite well. They are quite a decent deck. Unfortunately, power counters versus Russian Fairy Tales are GG. Not much more to say than that. It's 2 power counter factions, one of which also loves to play actions on their own minions, against the Russians, who, if they see you putting up a bunch of stuff on your minion, will shuffle it into your deck. Greek Vigilantes. They went down to Steampunk Knights in the second round. Steampunk Knights felt like they did the same kind of game better. In general, Vigilantes do not like to face other large minion factions because their mechanic of using shuffle into the opponent's deck as their primary form of removal ends up actually improving the opponent's deck over the course of a long game. This is not something you want to do when you're facing knights or Avengers or princesses, and as a result, Vigilantes generally lose these matchups. Their first round, they faced Russian Fairy Roamers. That's sort of an unremarkable matchup. It's really just who gets there first. Greek Vigilantes have even enough minion qualifiers. Vigilantes in general have very even minion quality with most of their possible pairings, because the 4s, while they're better than the average minion, aren't enough better than the average minion to make transforming a 4 this devastating disaster. Final deck that got eliminated in the second round is the Horse Plants, who got knocked out by the eventual champion. And in the first round, they had... Wow, okay. 2 decks in the first 2 rounds had to play against the 2 Beauty and the Beast decks. That was a pairing error on my part in both cases. But Horse Plants were the deck that finished second to me in that 2016 single elimination 1v1 tournament at Gen Con and had not lost a base until they faced my Elder Geeks. So this, at that time, was a seriously good deck. What happened? Rainbow got an errata, plus some power creep when it comes to aggressive factions. We have better aggressive factions than we used to. On top of that, leaving a Rainbow in play with one other minion threatening to draw a card every turn is actually very scary when it comes from a rush deck. Nowadays, if you do that, you have to play a new minion at Rainbow's base every single turn in order to draw cards with that, meaning that the base will eventually get broken out of play and you are not threatening to draw cards forever. Without being able to use that particular play, Horse Plants have to play a lot more one-dimensionally than they used to. They can't tell the opponent, guess what, you have to start producing pressure and then I will counterpunch you and win the base. And then we have the decks that made it through. And in our third round, Greek Vigilantes had already been eliminated. They got fed to Sinister Werewolves because there were 9 decks, an odd number, that made it. Ninja Cowboys and Princess Shields. Both of these are surprisingly decent decks. Well, Ninja Cowboys is surprisingly decent. Princess Shield is 2 decent factions and you expect them to be decent. Princess Shield is more or less exactly what you would expect out of these 2 factions. Ninja Cowboys, I tried to do a lot of things with Cowboys. After that, I think I went and removed a bunch of Cowboys decks from the remaining qualifiers because it was clear that they were not serious candidates for Class A. I left in the Ninja Cowboys because they're a different way of looking at things. Ninjas tend to be pretty good. As it is overall, I think Ninjas did solve a lot of Cowboys' problems. It's just that Cowboys' problems are too severe in Class A to be solved by, really, I think, any Class A faction. Ninjas were able to at least like keep the games looking interesting for a while against fairy dragons until there were too many targets for the ninjas' destruction. Cowboys weren't good enough at pushing things forward. This was eventually a loss for them, but the ninjas performed well. Round 1, they made mincemeat out of the Kitty Wizards, and round 3 they made a draw with a decent deck and went out of the tournament. Not too much more to say about that. Zombie and the Beast. Now here's where I get to compare the two Beauty and the Beast decks. Beauty and the Beast rely on discarding cards in order to get some benefit for discarding them. In their case, they mostly have a bunch of cards that they can play for free if they discard them, and a bunch of cards that discard something else for a benefit. The synergy with zombies is primarily Tenacious Z, plus the fact that zombies can return discarded cards from the discard pile. Unfortunately, there is also an anti-synergy. Beauty and the Beast has a 2 of action that reads, shuffle up to 2 minions from your discard pile into your deck. And they have the benefit that this action has the benefit that if you discard it, you can play it for free. Yeah, that's fantastically useless when you're playing zombies. I mean, there are situations where you will want to do it, like when you're maybe at the very end of your reshuffle, but for the vast majority of possible partner factions for Beauty and the Beast, you want to shuffle your strong minions back into your deck and draw them again. Zombies wants them in the discard pile to play them from the discard pile. So that hurt it a bit, and on top of that, Beauty and the Beast is non-interactive primarily. They can't target their opponent's cards and do bad things to their opponent's cards. Zombies suffer from the same problem. In general, you do not want to solitaire factions unless you're doing something incredibly broken. Now, when I compare this to Mage and the Beast, mages have a lot more ways to discard cards than zombies do. Mages love discarding cards for gain, and Beauty and the Beast takes full advantage of this. This is probably the most synergistic partner you can have for Beauty and the Beast. Maybe not the strongest possible Beauty and the Beast deck, but certainly the one that exceeds the power of its individual factions by the highest margin. On top of that, if you're going to be shuffling Wand Whizzes back into your deck, is extremely powerful. And since Beauty and the Beast does a good job of sort of drawing through its deck rapidly, the Mage's somewhat limited removal. They've got 2 cards that can destroy a 3 at the cost of discarding a card, and their 5 power minion has a talent that lets it destroy a 2 or less. They draw these cards more frequently, and as a result, Mages can actually function as a somewhat reliable source of removal when paired with Beauty and the Beast. You'll get similar results if you pair them with Wizards or Grannies, on their removal aspect at least, not on the overall quality of the deck. So for this reason, I think Zombie was a sort of a fail partner for Beauty and the Beast, but also I don't expect any other partner will do as well as Mages did. I'm wanting to look at Werewolves, Wizards, and the Heroes. I may think of some other things to add in qualifiers 6 through 8. Steampunk Knights finally went down in the 3rd round to Mage and Beast. They are a perfectly strong deck. They were not strong enough against Mage and the Beast. They're good. They just weren't really good enough. Fairy Dragons then lost to Zombie Explorers. They were my 1 seed. They are 2 very strong factions. They are quite a strong deck. They were not strong enough when they had to face a top Explorers deck, and then they dropped 1 deck against an excellent stream of alternate VP from the Steampunk Knights. The Steampunk Knights looked like they were done and dusted, and they pulled off a Grail play. They returned, I forget the name of the card, but it's the card that when you move a minion here, draw a card, and if you have 8 or more cards in your hand, destroy this action to gain 1 VP. They played that card multiple times. They got a VP off of Green Knight. They did all of the Knight's alternate VP things, and they managed to survive all the Dragon's negative VP and win the game. And finally, the Russian Roamers. Russian Roamers needed to win both games to make it to 6-2. Instead, Sinister Werewolves win both games. Sinister werewolves, when you stall out against them, like Russian fairy tales like to do to their opponents, sinister werewolves have a tendency to go off and start becoming unstoppable. And that's why they were able to finish in 3rd place as currently the 2nd-ranked wildcard. That is it for my coverage of what happened in Qualifier 5. Qualifier 6, I intend to start streaming some of these games on Tabletop Simulator, probably with the very first matchup, which is Magical Girl Ants versus Princess Spies. Probably does not have a lot of consequences for the overall championship. I don't expect either deck will advance out of the qualifier phase, but it'll be a good practice game for me to get started, and then we'll see some of the interesting matchups that will take place in Qualifier 6 in person. We'll also get to see how many bad plays chat gets to catch me making, and if I'm able to maybe get a little bit better because people are criticizing me while I play. So I will see some of you guys hopefully on stream if I get all of this stuff working correctly and it turns out, my upload speed is working fine and stuff like that. Even if I don't see you guys on stream, I will still see you guys when I finish Qualifier 6 with my summary video. Happy smashing, everyone!